Hello and welcome to a pre-Thanksgiving edition of VU Sports Wired. Cutler Klein here alongside Max Schneider and Drew Sundaram. Thank you so much as always for tuning in. We have a fantastic show for you today filled with the good news and the bad news from Commodore Sports, and believe me, there's plenty of both. We will start with the biggest piece of good news that has come to Vanderbilt basketball in a long, long time. Five-star point guard Darius Garland has committed to play basketball right here at Vanderbilt University. It's the number 11th ranked prospect in the ESPN 100 ratings. As we take a look at some of his highlights from last night's 43-point performance for Brentwood Academy just down the road here, native of Gary, Indiana. And as you can see here, he has absolutely unbelievable handles, unbelievable skill, and just an incredible all-around athlete to be coming here to Vanderbilt. Had offers from places like Duke, Indiana, Kansas, Kentucky, and UCLA, and chose to come to little old Vanderbilt University over all of those big-time schools. Like I said, 11th ranked prospect in the country according to the ESPN 100. Number 1 in Tennessee, the 6'2", 170-pound Garland is going to be a special player for the Vanderbilt Commodores. Now, guys, Garland we've known about for a long time. It's been absolutely incredible that Vanderbilt made his top 6, much less that they actually got him. I mean, what is this going to do to the face of Vanderbilt basketball, especially considering the other recruits that are thinking about coming to Vanderbilt?
I mean, this is a huge step for Vanderbilt. Not only is Garland kind of the top recruit to ever choose this program and to ever step foot on Vanderbilt's campus, but he's also a natural leader. I mean, this is a guy who's led Brentwood Academy for 4 straight years. He was a starter since his freshman year. As you saw in the first game of the season, dropped 43 last night. And he's such a prototypical point guard, which is exactly what this team needs. He's a guy who can create offense. He's a guy who's an excellent passer, an excellent ball handler, and really can shoot from anywhere in the gym. So he's a guy that's going to fit in with this team perfectly, especially because of his ability to create offense. We talk about Vanderbilt a lot, how that offense is a real half-court offense, kind of slow, stagnant, take up most of the shot clock. He's the kind of guy that can get into the paint. He's quick, he's athletic, and he can make plays for this team, and that's what this team needs. A playmaker who's able to get these shooters the ball and give these guys open shots. And not only is it his ability on the court, but what he does for Bryce Drew and this program going forward. I mean, we talk about Simi Shitu and Romeo Langford. They haven't committed yet, but both considering Vanderbilt strongly, especially Shitu. If they're able to get some of these guys, this becomes a top recruiting class in the nation. And, I mean, I spoke to Garland on Monday. He said a lot of things about how everybody chooses Duke and everybody chooses Kentucky. And he wanted to be different, and he wanted to create an environment at Memorial where everyone wants to go see Vanderbilt play basketball and where Vanderbilt can compete with those blue blood programs in recruiting and on the basketball court. And he's the first step towards doing that, a real trailblazer for this program.
Right. When you're talking about the face of Vanderbilt basketball, I think immediately he does become that face of Vanderbilt basketball. And I think it's really interesting because we've had a lot of players who had talent, yes, but I think that Darius Garland brings a different type of personality and a different type of charisma to this Vanderbilt basketball team. I think that's going to be something that's really interesting to see because we really haven't had a player that has that type of almost like star power, star quality to them. So I think that's going to draw a lot of eyes towards Vanderbilt basketball. And when you're talking about recruiting, the fact that he chose Vanderbilt over really, really big-name schools that all these 5-star prospects usually go to, I think that's huge for Vanderbilt. And I'm not saying it's going to put us on like the exact same level as an Indiana or Kentucky, but it's definitely a step in the right direction, especially when you see the other names that are considering playing here because of the fact that Darius Garland chose Vanderbilt. I think that's huge. So I think that him becoming the face of Vanderbilt basketball only bodes well for the program.
If you look at the history, this is Vanderbilt's highest-rated recruit ever. The last highest-rated one, it was in probably around the 20 or 30 range, and it was John Jenkins, who came here a few years ago. Even before ESPN started rating prospects, a guy like Will Perdue was Vanderbilt's highest-rated prospect, and he went on to win NBA titles with the Chicago Bulls. If you look at the history of Vanderbilt basketball in general, they've typically been Vanderbilt's best major sports team. Back before Tim Corbin reinvigorated the baseball program, back before James Franklin and Derek Mason were able to bring Vanderbilt some sort of relevance in football, basketball was the sport here. Memorial Gym was the place to be. If you go back as far as early as 10 years ago, maybe even before that, if you wanted to go see Vanderbilt play Kentucky at Memorial Gym, you're going to have to camp out outside of Memorial Gym. There were lines down the block and around the corner. Nowadays, you can walk in middle of the first quarter and still get a decent seat to watch if you're a student. Which, I mean, it just shows how much it's changed and how much Vanderbilt basketball has kind of fallen by the wayside. I mean, there's still a lot of hype around the team. People still care. It's just not the same as it used to be. And I think bringing Garland in here is going to change that for sure. And especially if they can bring Shitu and Langford in here. And this is going to be the kind of thing that is a reawakening of Vanderbilt basketball. It's going to be a reawakening on a bigger scale of Vanderbilt basketball. How do you think beyond Langford and Shitu can this have an impact? Because if more recruits start seeing Vanderbilt be successful, start seeing big names come here, then maybe more other big names will come in 2019 and 2020 and beyond that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the effect of this is twofold. And first, like you talked about with recruiting, I mean, it leads to more recruits not only considering, but actually coming here. I mean, next year, James Wiseman, who's the #1 overall recruit, has Vanderbilt on his list. And so that's not something that you see in past years. It takes one guy, it takes a guy like Garland to make that kind of leap and choose the less obvious school and improve that program. And it also takes a coach like Bryce Drew to be able to do it. Garland said Vanderbilt was on his list, but he couldn't imagine himself coming to Vanderbilt before Bryce Drew got here. So it takes a change. And the second part of that is getting students to these games, creating kind of a buzz around Vanderbilt basketball. I mean, I had people coming up to me who don't follow this team at all, excited about Garland choosing Vanderbilt, and it brings more people to the games. Garland said it himself. He's heard about this Memorial Magic, but really hasn't been able to see it, and he hopes that he can get some of that excitement back around this team and wants Memorial Gym to be packed every night. And he's the perfect player to do it. I mean, he's a local kid. He lives close. He's excited about the program. He's the first one to do it. His high school coach says he thinks he's the most skilled player to ever come out of the state of Tennessee, which is a giant endorsement for a guy who's been coaching here for years and years. So it takes one guy like Garland, and he's hopefully will be able to make that effect both in recruiting and in attendance.
Right. I think with the vibe of the sports culture at Vanderbilt, a lot of people usually don't follow high school sports or high school athletes who are committing to Vanderbilt. So the fact that this story is that big, I think that speaks wonders to the actual impact of this. I think that Darius Garland said it best himself when he said that he wanted to almost make this basketball team a must-see team, like a much-watched program. And I think that he has the exact right mindset and the exact right mentality to kind of reinvigorate this program. And with him and Bryce Drew, I think this program's not going to be one that kind of falls to the wayside anymore. I think that this is going to be a really, really exciting program, and just watching Darius Garland is going to be so much fun. And I think that's the first step towards reinvigorating the program as a whole.
Even just with Garland, regardless of who else can come in the 2018 class, is going to be a huge impact on this program. Mizzou type kind of thing where they get guys like Michael Porter Jr., and suddenly everyone's hyped about Missouri basketball.
He'll be the best player on the floor from the second he gets there.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you've seen the guys that Vanderbilt has right now. Guys like Saban Lee are already making an impact. Maxwell Evans, or all these different guys are doing great work for Vanderbilt, especially Saban Lee. He's looked phenomenal early on this season. But to add a guy like Garland, it's going to be on another level. He's going to dominate the game. You saw it in the highlight film there. He's going to dominate the floor for Vanderbilt among SEC competition. And
right.
That's what's going to be fun to watch.
And when you look at the way that other people talk about Garland, it's really cool because everyone loves him as a teammate because he's always trying to get other people the ball. He's always trying to facilitate. And you said it, he's that prototypical point guard. And that's huge that people love playing with him.
It's amazing to talk about Vanderbilt basketball and saying, how long is this guy going to stay at Vanderbilt? Is this guy going to be a one and done? I don't know if Garland, based on the way Garland's talked about Vanderbilt, not sure it's going to be him. Shitu, possibly. Who knows what's going to happen with them? But it's just amazing to talk about Vanderbilt basketball being a one and done place because it is the furthest thing from it for so many years, and that's going to be really incredible stuff. Going from the bad, or from the good, I should say, of Vanderbilt sports to the bad, Vanderbilt football fell on Saturday to the Kentucky Wildcats, putting their bowl chances on the brink. Let's roll these highlights. Vanderbilt and Kentucky coming to you from Vanderbilt Stadium on a Salute to Service Day. The names of fallen soldiers on the back of the Commodores' uniforms. An incredible gesture there from the Commodores. First quarter, Ralph Webb through the line. Get off me, son. 5-yard line to the end zone. Vanderbilt up 7-0. Things are looking up for the Commodores at this point in the game. 3rd and 7 right before this play. Kentucky gets a big chunk of yards down close to the red zone. And then there goes that man, Saheem King, to the house untouched to tie the game for Kentucky. Bad break there for Vanderbilt, and it would get even worse beyond that. Really tough break there for Vanderbilt. Now here comes more rushing attack. There goes Benny Snell, breaking all kinds of tackles. Multiple Vanderbilt defenders had their chance to get the hands on him. Benny Snell says, You don't do that. 22-yard run to put them up 14-7. There in the second quarter, they take that into halftime. Then look at this play here. This is wacky stuff in sports here. Screen pass. He's getting down the field. There comes the strip. The ball is out. There are 3 Vanderbilt defenders there, and yet Kentucky is going to be the one to come up with it. There were 3 Commodore defenders going after that. Then on the ensuing play, there goes Saheem King. That's Benny Snell rather off of that. Saheem King and Snell traded touchdowns throughout the whole game. That gave Snell the most touchdowns in Kentucky history. Kentucky continuing to build the lead, and there goes Saheem King, completely untouched, completely broken coverage on that play from the Commodores. The route would be on from there. Kentucky still getting chances here. The Wildcat, there goes Benny Snell again. As easy as those touchdowns come, we could say that about a lot of these Kentucky touchdowns in this game. The route was indeed on. Later on, Kyle Shermer to Kalijah Lipscomb making the dipsy doodle move, getting towards the goal line. Kalijah Lipscomb, a freak athlete. Shermer and Lipscomb really some of the huge bright spots in this game, but that was pretty much it for Vanderbilt. 44-21, the final score. Vanderbilt falls to 4-6. Now are 1 loss away from losing bowl eligibility chances. So, guys, we've been on saying that for the longest time about Vanderbilt is that, they need to get back to what they were doing well. They need to get back to what they were doing well. They've had so many chances to right the ship, to get things right. And time again, they failed to do it. I mean, I don't know about you. I'm fed up with what's going on with Vanderbilt football right now. And I don't know about you guys. How fed up are you with this team right now?
Right. I love how this question is how fed up are with you with this team and not if you're fed up with this team. Because it feels like all season we've been holding out hope. We've been waiting for that one breakthrough game, that couple of wins that'll get this program back on track, get the team back to its winning ways, so to say. And it's just at the point where we need to realize we're not going to get there. And I feel like that really long fumble play was probably the most resembling of Vanderbilt's season so far. A really, really good football play, really good pursuit, punching the ball out. It's a fumble, really good play, and then just dysfunction on all types of levels across Vanderbilt's team. And I just think that when you look at what happened last week, it's just so tough to hold out hope for any type of winning or any type of success for the rest of the season. I mean, you look at Shermer, who is having a really amazing season. Only threw 3 interceptions coming into this game, throws 4 picks in this game. The offensive line let him get sacked 5 times. Then when you look at Kentucky's running backs, they had a field day with this defense. They ran for 5 touchdowns. Vanderbilt's defense couldn't tackle them if they tried to. It really didn't look like they were putting in that much effort with exclusively arm tackles the whole game. So how fed up were you? Incredibly fed up.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to kind of take this season as a whole and look at it as a whole because it's really easy to get high on the highs like last week with Western Kentucky and really low on the lows this week against Kentucky at home. But when you look at this season as a whole, you have to take into account expectations. And last season, when this team went 6-6, whether they liked it or not, they raised the bar for this program. And now coming into this season, it's not only bowl or bust, but we want to improve on this past season. And a lot of people thought that this team could contend for the SEC East. I mean, no one expected Georgia to storm out of the gates the way they did, but Vanderbilt was supposed to be a team that could ruffle some feathers and could contend. Instead, they're 4-6 and on the brink of missing a bowl game, needing 2 wins to just equal last season's total. And I think that's a real problem because once you set the bar, you can't really go back on that and still be satisfied with this program. Of course, you have to be fed up with this program, and you have to be fed up with the way they're losing these games, too. I mean, when you talk about games like Missouri and Kentucky and South Carolina, these are games that you mark on the schedule at the beginning of the season and say, we need to win these games if we're going to be a successful program. And now 2 years in a row, they've lost 2 of those games and likely a third with Missouri coming up this week. Those aren't teams that you can afford to lose to. I mean, Derek Mason, he's a great coach. We love him here in Nashville, but he's 5-25 in SEC play. That's inexcusable, and I know Vanderbilt is also one of those bottom feeders, but once you set that expectation like Mason did last year, it's hard to come out and go winless in the SEC again. So he needs to right the ship with these last 2 games, and if they finish 4-8, he's going to go into next season on the hot seat a little bit. And I think when you look at this past couple weeks, it's really been a microcosm of this entire problem. I mean, Western Kentucky, they seem to fix everything. They're back on top. The expectations are high again. They stop the run. They do everything right. And then they come back out the next week and are absolutely dreadful against the run with Benny Snell and Saheem King dominating against them. So you have to be able to show this level of consistency, not just week to week, but year to year if you want to improve as a program. And Vanderbilt's doing the exact opposite. They're taking a huge dip from last year, and it really is inexcusable, and everyone should be fed up with this team.
Look, if we're being realistic here, James Franklin set the bar for this program when he made 3 bowl games in his 3 seasons here. Derek Mason kept the bar there by making the bowl game last year, because the talk was, was it just Franklin that was able to find success here? Was it just him? Well, no. Mason actually did it. He did it in the most improbable fashion. That team had no expectations last year. We were talking late in the season last year about Vanderbilt football. The expectations weren't there. We were talking about them as in, oh my gosh, they actually made a bowl game. This is pretty incredible. And they set themselves up for success this season. They set themselves up to have a good year. And they're not following through on that. They absolutely are not. No matter what way you look at it, Vanderbilt cannot finish with more regular season wins than they did last year. And that in and of itself means it's a failed season. I don't think there's any way around that. And I think one of the biggest indicators of just how bad this team has been is if you look at some of the games they played earlier in the season, and in hindsight, you say, wow, that was a worse game than we thought. When Vanderbilt beat Kansas State 14-7 in week 3, we've since come to learn that Kansas State was probably not deserving of that ranking that they had during that game. So that win should not be as highly regarded as it probably was at the time. Then comes the loss to Florida a couple weeks later. Florida's a really bad football team. They just fired their coach. They're not good. And Vanderbilt gave up 38 points to them. So, in general, this is a failed season. Is there any way that they could make this not a failed season? I feel like even if they go to a bowl game, people are not going to be very happy about this, or at least that they shouldn't. And that might be a bigger problem.
Right. So when I'm thinking about this being a failed season, I tend to think about what Derek Mason said when he said, record-wise, we're in a similar-ish spot to where we were last year, but the momentum is completely different. And because we had those expectations last year, or we didn't have expectations last year, and we had expectations coming into this season, every time Vanderbilt messes up, every time Vanderbilt loses a game, it's just a further letdown. So even if they do manage to get into a bowl game somehow, we're going to look at it and be like, we didn't triumphantly get into this bowl game. We're not really happy or proud of the season that we had. It'd almost be like an undeserving bowl game, and we just kind of squeaked into the field. So I really don't see how they could make success out of this season. All we can kind of talk about are building blocks going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one way Vanderbilt can kind of salvage this is to go 2-0 and to win that bowl game, because, to be honest, winning a bowl game is a step over making a bowl game. And if you're going to make any step past last season, that's the only way you're going to do it, especially if you're able to beat in-state rival Tennessee again. Obviously, that win doesn't mean so much considering how bad Tennessee has been this year, but it's always something that Vanderbilt's prided themselves on, beating Tennessee, and if they have the opportunity to go into Knoxville and do that to clinch a bowl game, then that's something that can be huge for them. I think that's really the only way that they can salvage this season is to go 2-0 and to win that bowl game. But when you look at the schedule ahead, how is this Vanderbilt team going to beat Missouri? Missouri is an absolutely high-flying offense. They've put up 50 points on multiple occasions this season. Vanderbilt's offense isn't good enough to put up 50 points. And this defense, frankly, has not been good enough in recent weeks to stop Missouri from doing so. So if you want to salvage this season, it's going to take a lot, and it's going to take this team growing up a lot in 1 week. And that's not something this team's been able to do since Kansas State. Kansas State's the only good win this team has had all season, really. So it's going to take a lot going into next week, and I don't know how realistic it is, but if you're going to salvage the season, it needs to be now.
Mizzou continues to put up 40-point games, so that leads me to believe that if Vanderbilt puts up the same kind of defensive performance that they did last week, that Mizzou could actually put up more points than Alabama did against Vanderbilt. That's a really realistic thing that could happen. The line is only about 7.5. I think I read Clay Travis today said the blood bank guarantee of the week is to put all your money on Mizzou in that game, because there's no way that this Vanderbilt defense can slow down that high-octane kind of offense, especially if they play like they did last week. But the one sliver of hope for Vanderbilt in this game, and I cannot believe I'm saying this again, is that continually throughout the years, time and time again, this goes back to last year and years before that, when Vanderbilt is least expected to win anything, they somehow find a way to win. That's just what happens. Last year, think about where we were last year in this same week. We were talking about a Vanderbilt loss to Mizzou. That was probably one of the worst losses Mason has had, and he's had a lot of bad losses. That was an abysmal loss at Mizzou when Mizzou wasn't nearly as good as they were this year. And then Vanderbilt goes out against Ole Miss and wins. An Ole Miss team that was pretty good. Hugh Freeze's last hurrah, but still pretty good. and then goes and beats a Tennessee team in front of a mostly orange crowd at Vanderbilt Stadium. Beats them pretty handily. After all the talk about champions of life and stuff from Butch Jones, rest in peace, it was a wonderful end of the season for them. But they were not expected to do anything. After the Ole Miss loss, it was saying, oh, well, they're probably still not going to beat Tennessee, but good for them. They came in and blew the door open. That's the only way you can rationally think Vanderbilt could do anything, is that small sliver of hope that somehow when Vanderbilt is least expected to do anything, they somehow do everything.
Right, that just shows how inconsistent this program is, too. Like, they're inconsistent when they're supposed to win a game. They're inconsistent when they're supposed to lose a game. Like, it's really just hard to slate them as a W or an L in any column.
Yeah, and I think I chalk that up a little bit to kind of the parity in the SEC nowadays. I mean, going into any given week, with the exception of Alabama and Georgia on this team's schedule, all these teams Vanderbilt can beat and Vanderbilt can lose to. I mean, it's hard to say that now with the season they've had going into a game against Missouri, but the SEC really has this level of parity that they haven't had in years past. It's not so top-heavy anymore besides those two teams. It's really any given team can win in any given week. And so I think that's why you're seeing a little bit of this inconsistency. But you're right, Vanderbilt is this team that has been able to kind of pull a rabbit out of a hat in past years and have lost games to teams that they have no business losing to. So, of course, it is possible coming to this week against Missouri, but like I said, it's going to take a lot of growing up in a short time.
It absolutely will. Vanderbilt taking on Mizzou, 6:30 p.m. Central at Vanderbilt Stadium. If you're sticking around, come out and support the Commodores for their last home game of the year. And senior night for guys like Ralph Webb should be an emotional evening at Vanderbilt Stadium. Now, before we wrap up the show, more good news out of Vanderbilt athletics. The Vanderbilt soccer team is headed to the second round of the NCAA tournament for the first time since 1998. They 2-1 win over number 4 seeded Ohio State last Friday. Stephanie Amack had the game-winning goal in that one in the 89th minute on a header out of the corner. Guys, this was absolutely remarkable and absolutely historic, and it turned a lot of heads, I think. People are really hyped about this team. I think that's something that I'm happy about to see, that people are paying attention to the Vanderbilt sports other than kind of the big three. Is it kind of cool to see some of those teams having success?
Absolutely, and not only is it cool, it's really necessary. I mean, Cutler, you talked in your column this week about how simply the administration isn't pouring enough into athletics and making the students care. And so if the administration's not going to do that, some of these small sports have to step up, like soccer, make a run, and force fans to actually pay attention and care about this team. And that's exactly what this women's soccer team has done. Really no expectations going into the season. And then not only to make the tournament, but to beat a powerhouse team like Ohio State the way they did in the dramatic fashion that they've been able to do all season. I mean, Azari with that corner to Stephanie Amack to be able to put it in the 89th minute for the win, that's something that this team's done all season. So to be able to have that flair for the dramatic, to be able to win big games in big situations on a national stage like the NCAA tournament is huge for this program, because when you're not getting it done in the big three sports, you need to hold your own in sports like bowling, in sports like tennis, in sports like soccer, and that's exactly what Vanderbilt's been able to do to continue to show that athletics at this school should be and are at a premium. And soccer's going to continue to do that if they keep playing the way they are.
Right, it's really tough because when you talk about the Vanderbilt fan base and Vanderbilt students, apathetic is a word that comes to mind a lot of the time when you're thinking about this. And it's really a fan base that gets driven off of success. So every time there's a program that's really successful, you see a lot of support and a lot of people rally around that success. And when you don't have that success in a lot of these big three sports, it's really tough because you start to see that fan base drop off. I mean, if you look at football attendance, it's abysmal this year. It's really, really tough. So I think that when you look at teams, you have to start looking outside that big three for who's going to garner success and garner attention and garner eyeballs. And I think that our women's soccer team is doing an amazing job at that. And when you look at the way that they've been winning games, with the resilience, being down a lot, but having that composure to be able to come from behind, and the fact that there are so many young players on this team and is building really good success for years forward, I think that speaks really well to the type of consistency we should hope to expect from this team. And the fact that they keep on upsetting all these really big teams, I think that's huge just for the sports culture at Vanderbilt.
Absolutely. You mentioned that the tennis and the bowling before, Max. 2 out of 3 Vanderbilt's championships, or national championships, have come from those teams. 2007 for women's bowling, 2015 for women's tennis. They also had the College Baseball World Series title that year as well. So this is a school that can dominate in these sports. And that's a thing that should go more noticed by more people. Not just, friends going to support friends at events. They should be things that are noticed and taken more seriously. You mentioned before, if the administration is not going to support athletics, then the athletes themselves are going to try and make them support athletics. And that's a really, really encouraging sign.
Yeah, absolutely. And soccer's done that extremely well this year. Golf, another sport that's done that extremely well. When you talk about Theo Humphrey, the way he was able to compete over the summer, and tennis. I mean, tennis is a sport that's just 2 years off a national championship and SEC championship. These small sports have really lifted spirits at the school. And like you said, Drew, when these sports succeed, the students rally around them. And that's something that Vanderbilt students have been great at, being there for the team when the team is hot, when the team is succeeding. Last year against Kentucky, against Florida, in those basketball games, when Vanderbilt was kind of at its prime, everyone was there. So it's a program that's really driven by success, not so much driven by name brand and name recognition or driven by the administration. It's very, very success driven, and soccer's being able to pick up on that right now.
Right, I'm going to be really interested to see how the administration handles women's soccer next year, because this season has been a huge, huge success, and I'm really going to hope that attendance is really, really pushed going into the games next season, because we have this team that's had all this huge success, really successful in the tournament. That's something that we really need to capitalize on, and we as a fan base need to rally around too.
Absolutely, for sure. Vanderbilt takes on Santa Clara in the NCAA tournament in Columbia, South Carolina, this Friday at 2 p.m. Central on SEC Network Plus. With that, that'll just about do it for this week's episode of VU Sports Wired. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Hope you have a happy, happy Thanksgiving break. From Max Schneider and Drew Sundaram, I am Cutler Klein saying so long, happy Thanksgiving, and we'll see you next time.